Hi, and welcome to the From Stretford to Singapore podcast. I'm your host, Anne Morgan, and today I'm going to be discussing university applications. Now, my goodness, that's a subject that's caused endless debates, much gnashing of teeth, both families here in Singapore and across the world. So I'm delighted to be joined by three experts today who can give us their unique perspective on navigating what can be a really tricky pathway from being a high school student to actually applying for universities. So I'm delighted to be joined by Andy Lee, who is the founder and CEO of Ivy Education. He is an expert university admissions counsellor, and he has helped over 100 students get into top universities. So welcome, Andy. Delighted to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm also thrilled to have Vihan Chandiramani here today. He is a newly minted high school graduate. He's just graduated from the United World College, UWC, here in Singapore. So we really are delighted and thrilled to have you in the studio today, Vihan.
Thank you for having me.
And we're joined by Vihan's mum, Alka Chandiramani. Now, as well as having two sons who've navigated the high school journey, she's also a highly respected and very well recognised career coach who's spoken to countless numbers of high school students about their aspirations, both for their careers and for their personal life. So it's brilliant to have all your perspectives here today. Andy, I'm going to start with you. Now, you are a graduate from Columbia and Cornell University. You were well set for a career in law, and then you had a change of heart. You set up your own educational consultancy and travelled halfway across the world. Why? What prompted that?
It's a very good question. So after I finished university, I was a bit confused as to what it is that I wanted to do. So going to law school was an option that I considered for a very long time. So I worked in the New York City District Attorney's Office as a legal assistant for a year and a half, where I had an opportunity to shadow prosecutors, got a sense of how the legal system worked, especially criminal law. And after that experience, I wasn't really convinced that this is a pathway that I was going to follow. I didn't rule it out at that point, but I wanted to see what else was out there. So I left the position and I moved to Shanghai, China, to enroll in a Mandarin Chinese course, a language that I've been studying since I was in high school, but never really had a chance to really be fully immersed in a country where it was spoken by most people on an everyday basis.
Wow. So you've reached into your heart and followed, a passion that you had. Vihan, you've just completed a huge life milestone. You're putting high school behind you now, and your future beckons. What aspirations have you got?
I mean, in terms of aspirations for the long term, I have somewhat of an idea of what I want to do. So I've applied to university for biomedical engineering because I see that as not necessarily the profession that I want to get into, but more as a platform for me to be able to get into any other profession I want to at a later point of time. But I mean, in the near future, I have to still overcome national service in Singapore. So I guess for me, that's my next challenge before I move on to my further life aspirations.
Yeah, fantastic. And what a grounding it's going to give you. Mm-hmm. Now, Alka, you've had two sons who have graduated from high school. Mm-hmm. One's already at university, so he's done the full university application, and Vihan's soon going to be doing that as well. So what do you think has been the most difficult part of that journey, the actual university application journey?
I think, as a parent, and I think every parent will resonate, you always want the best for your child, right? So we know the term in Singapore is called kiasu, right? Kiasu is always wanting to be first. And I think across the board, being a very academically, sort of environment, we're always looking for, do we need to put them in extra tuitions? Do we need to do this? Do we need to do that? And I think that what I've learned from having two boys who are really different is that I've got to actually parent them very differently. So not the same parenting that I did with my older son. My younger son, actually, Vihan, has taught me that, you kind of have to give him the driving seat. He's got to be the steering wheel of his own destination. And I think that that's really been a huge pivotal point for me as a parent to learn, because each child is so different, and their aspirations are so different. But one thing I will say, that national service may be a bit long, because in Singapore it's for about 2 years, and if you do pass the fitness test, it goes down to 22 months. It is a point where I've seen my older one turn from a boy to being a man. Huge shift in perspective, huge shift in mindset.
Yeah. And that's the thing around national service is that's a huge debate. Going from a boy to a man, a girl to a woman.
Yeah.
But Andy, you are talking to lots of students who have to make that transition without national service. They have to go from being, the safety almost of a high school where it's very prescriptive to university life and the development of more than just the academics. So what do you find causes students the most difficulty in terms of this whole process?
Right. It's a very, very important sort of topic, the sort of transition from high school or secondary school to university. And since most of the students that I work with are age 15 to 18, I really get a sort of front row seat into seeing how this transformation happens. And sort of my role as a counselor is really to make sure that they're well supported throughout the entire journey as they're navigating this, arduous and complex process. I think some of the problems that students have is that there are too many options out there now.
Yeah.
We live in a day and age where we have lots of different resources and we're not really sure which are the appropriate resources to use. So as a counselor, I help students better navigate that, helping them find relevant resources, programs, courses, summer programs, research opportunities that actually matter and actually would be a good fit for them. So I think that's a huge challenge. I think the second challenge is really just the complexity of the university admissions process in the U.S. It's a very holistic process that involves performance in academics as well as in extracurriculars, and really trying to help the student make sense of this entire process so that when they actually apply in their final year of high school, they're well prepared and well situated to present themselves in the best possible light.
Wow. And just while we're talking about the US system, now we've all read in the press, the terrible scandal that, came around recently where there was money changed hands and there were bribes given to admission, the admission staff and also bribes given to elevate people's grades. What's your perspective on that?
Right. So this scandal is still evolving. It was recently, I think it was in March when this whole thing came to the surface. So based on my understanding of the scandal, I think there are a few important points that should be noted. I think William Singer, so he was sort of the ringleader behind this, was hired by some prominent families in the U.S. and also abroad to sort of basically play the role of facilitating bribery. So that's my understanding of the situation, where parents would funnel money into his nonprofit organization, and then he would then funnel the money to various corrupt university administrators who would then help the students get into certain schools. So coaches, university coaches were implicated because they took bribes from these parents. Certain proctors for exams were also charged as well for taking bribes, where they basically help students score higher on the exam by giving them answers, helping them change grades. So I agree with you. This is a huge scandal. But I think it's also important to note the difference between what William Singer did and what other counselors who are trained and professional do. His actions are things that none of the professional counselors would condone. Our job as college counselors are really to serve as an advocate for students, helping them uncover their strengths, finding relevant resources, and when they actually apply for university, help these students best position their strengths to the university admissions officers. We do not condone practices of cheating, of bribing. It's really presenting a very authentic, compelling version of the student without fabrication.
Yeah, that's a fine line, isn't it?
Yes.
To actually navigate that.
Definitely.
Actually, and it's wonderful, I would imagine, to be able to bring out in a student that the true blossoming of who they are and where their strengths lie, and it must be quite bewildering, I suppose, if you're young and you're a little bit, you don't have the confidence.
Exactly, and that's really one of the main joys of my job, is to be able to introduce these different opportunities and perspectives to my students so that they realize that there's a lot out there in the world, and it's important for them to start considering all the different options, and really seeing them grow and develop in the process is something that I really, really enjoy about my job.
Uh-huh. Now, Vihan, you've just been through that process. You've probably learned a lot about yourself in high school, and where your strengths lie. And I was just wondering, do you feel very different at the end of high school than you did at the beginning?
I mean, it's sort of cliche that people say, you feel like kind of especially different after you graduate, but there is somewhat of like a hole that you feel within yourself. It's very mixed emotions, especially because I'm not necessarily going straight to university, and I'm going to be saying bye to a lot of my friends. So it's kind of like a void that you have to fill, because high school has kind of taken up your whole life for the past 2 years, and school has for the past however many years you've grown up. But I think also just coming back to what Andy said, I thought it was very important to stress that either counselors or parents should be support to children rather than being in the driving seat, because I think too often parents try to kind of vicariously live through their children, which is not necessarily a good thing, because I've seen from firsthand experience that kind of leads to too much dependence on others, especially when there's a huge shock from going into high school where everything's kind of handed to you, and then going into university where you have to kind of navigate your way through life. And so I think it's very important that during high school, students are eased or kind of given gradual independence, because that way it's a lot easier to transition into university life. So I think it's very important for parents to realize that they shouldn't over kind of complicate their children's life or be too involved with it, but rather instead of kind of dictating the things that they should be interested in, and the things that they should kind of venture into, they should be helping them explore different avenues and seeing where the children kind of naturally gravitate towards.
That is very profound, I have to say. And how would you advise someone, though, who is struggling to find their voice and find their way, and they feel that everybody else is and it's not just parents, I imagine, it's it's peers, it's teachers, it's counsel, everybody piling in on them. So how would you advise someone to find their own way?
So I think the most important thing I've realized at the end of high school is it's all about exposure. If you don't kind of experience new things, you're never going to be able to find things that you enjoy or find new things that you enjoy. I think it's all about, it's kind of to do with your comfort zone. And I think that if you kind of remain within your comfort zone, you're never going to be able to realize things that you truly enjoy. And so I think it's always about trying to seek discomfort, because it's about wanting to put yourself in situations that you've never been in before, and maybe doing activities that you've never participated in before, because that way you'd be able to kind of just experience new things, meet new people, and that way that just broadens your whole mindset on things that you want to do. So like, for example, during my high school career, I was involved with a various amount of activities, some to do with dance, some to do with sports, some to do with kind of startups, and kind of just the whole idea of ideation and prototyping. And so I think for me, I somewhat had to sacrifice a bit of academics, but I felt that it was good to venture and kind of experience all these things, because I thought that they would be more valuable in the long run, because essentially those were the things that allowed me to realize what I actually want to do in the next stage of my life.
Wow, and how amazing to have experienced it at this stage in your
Yeah.
life and not waited until some mythical day that
Yeah.
you would, you're ready to open up and get more experiences. That's
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Like when I was in high school, I often heard the term serendipity, and people often talked about it, but I never gave it too much thought because I thought that, it may not have much relevance to my life. But even my interest in biomedical engineering, I would say I would kind of attribute that to serendipity because it was based on a summer course where I applied for I put like 3 different preferences down, with biomedical engineering just being somewhat of an interest and being my third option. And somewhat fortunately, that got chosen to be the one I got selected for. So from that experience, I realized this was an industry that I was really interested in and looked very promising. So I think one part of it is to put yourself out there and get exposure. And the other thing is to kind of be willing to experience these new things and not just be closed off to experiencing new things in life.
wow. And you've managed to fit that into high school
Yeah.
as well, on top of everything else. That's a great testament, Alka. I mean, you have a very gifted son.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? I think every child is gifted. It's
Yeah.
really about finding, and I think I really resonate with what Andy and Vihan said. It's actually allowing the child to find what resonates with them, because it's not always about academics, is it? Really, it is really about finding your own voice. And I think also about, actually, I read something yesterday saying that we've got to find comfort even being vulnerable, which is really important. So basically, like the question about, can I show up? Is it okay to make a mistake? Can I make the mistake and just say, okay, you know what, it's fine, I'll learn from it. And really, that's what life is all about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think just to chime in, I think what Vihan and Alka said are totally on point. I think Vihan is, based on what I'm hearing, is a very ambitious, a very, very knowledgeable high school student. Unfortunately, a lot of high school students are not necessarily in that stage. A lot of them don't want to be taken out of their comfort zone because it's uncomfortable. And I think Vihan really represents a student who is actually very mature and has a good sense of how to sort of navigate this high school experience. A lot of the students that I work with, they actually tend to resort back to their comfort zone and may be a bit reluctant to go out and explore something different, even though that's really, really important. And I think one of the core responsibilities as a counselor is for me to encourage them to take the step out. And even if it means making mistakes, it's still going to be very beneficial because later on in their lives, they will have to learn how to overcome that and to sort of expand their comfort zone. And the only way to do that is by taking the step out. And sometimes the hardest step is actually being able to make that first step, to leave your comfort zone and do something that might be frightening, but may ultimately be very rewarding.
Wow. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier on that so navigating the actual process of university application with all of these things happening, so the authentic, being your authentic self, being out of your comfort zone and showing that you are that you can open out to new experiences. What are the differences between, say, the UK application process and the US application processes? How much do you have to show between the two?
So the two systems are actually incredibly different. The UK system is mainly focused on one thing, which is your academic performance. They don't care that much about what you do outside of the classroom. Whereas the US, it's more of a holistic process. Academics matter a lot, but other factors like, your ability in sports, your leadership skills, or any other special talents, maybe in music and dance, all of these things are actually factored in. So that's one key difference between the US and the UK. The UK is more focused on academic performance. The US is more focused on sort of holistic performance. Yes.
Yeah. So so it is really vital that students these days are incredibly well-rounded.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's a big part of what you're trying to do is bring that out.
Exactly.
And show it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's not it's not just saying it; it's showing it as well. Yeah.
It's interesting because I've actually been through both processes. So I've I actually did apply to both the UK and the US, so I could kind of firsthand see the huge contrast between both systems. And even though for me my UK applications were a lot more successful than the US applications, I still, if I was given the opportunity to go back and change anything, I wouldn't, just because the whole process of having to write all these kind of out of the box essays, I found that just for myself personally quite interesting, because you not only find out more about yourself, but you challenge yourself to think. And personally, that's something I like to do, is trying to just develop my thinking abilities. And so I really enjoyed the whole process of, even though it was a lot of work, and I would kind of ensure that students are aware that the US application process is probably involves a lot more work than the UK application process. I still do think it is very worth it, because not only just because of the schools, but also the process itself is quite self-rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Alka, you've spoken to many high school students who, and again, not all of whom find this process easy. What advice do you give them when you're talking to them if they're struggling?
In terms of applying to both the places?
Yeah, or just in general, really.
I think it's advice you give your children and advice you give others that you work with. It's always different, right, Andy? I think children will be like, oh, okay, it's just mom talking, it's fine, Okay, we'll listen, but maybe we won't really process it. But with other students, my stance, which is always look at your own value system. What do you think that you actually value the most, and in terms of whether it is about your future aspirations. And I think Vihan said it to me very correctly, in finding biomedical engineering, does that mean he's going to get into that area? No, it's not. It's a platform where he's going to actually build his foundation and move on, which is similar to my son, who's actually older son, which is doing law. He may not necessarily be a lawyer, but again, he wants that foundation, which he's going to find interesting. For every student, my advice would be, always go down to the basics. What makes you tick? What drives you? Because at the end of the day, your parent can't tell you what to do. It's that inner drive that's really important, that inner strength, inner drive to be able to get up in the morning, go to school, feel excited, get into the classroom, absorb everything, and just go out there and make a difference in the world. It doesn't matter what field you get into, but know what really drives you. Because at the end of the day, it's really like when you're in a job that you enjoy, it doesn't seem like a job at all, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. And just as somebody who, is not involved with this process at all, for me, what I'm finding out from the three of you is that it's just a wonderful experience to find out more about yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, what drives you. And let's face it, in life, I think a lot of what you've just said, Vihan, it applies to me as much as it applies to a high schooler. Be open to new experiences, try things, iterate, move forward, turn up. That's timeless advice for all of us. But the great thing about going through a university application process, regardless of success or not, is that you've gone through an exploration that, at a time of your life where you've got more of your future in front of you than you will, when you're at that crossroads in life where, you can take different pathways, and then you gain the confidence to change, as you did, Andy. I mean, that's a wonderful thing to do, to be on one pathway where everybody, I'm sure, your family, everyone else was thinking, God, that's an incredible pathway. But you had the confidence to say, no, it is good, but I want to do something different. And that really is remarkable.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting, because especially about what you said about how kind of students should look at it as a process where they can learn a lot more about themselves. I think the main issue that I have, or kind of one piece of criticism I would have for high schools, is that I think they prime students too much to look to the future. And so I don't think they actually tell the students or allow them to understand how beneficial the experience itself can be. It's more about looking at where they want to be after the experience, and how the whole application process is just kind of facilitating them to get to the next stage of their life. I think it's more important that they spend time telling the students and kind of helping them discover what rewarding kind of process the whole application experience can be. And it's also a criticism I have for the whole of high school, and that teachers should be the ones to suggest students to really take advantage of the experiences and moments they have in high school, because rather than focusing solely on academics and ensuring that they're ready for the future, they should allow them to be aware of all the experiences that are presented to them at that stage in their life, with all the activities and extracurricular activities, because that's truly what is going to shape them in their life.
Yeah. How would you say to other students who are finding it the pressure too much? How do they alleviate a bit of pressure?
So, I mean, if I relate it back to IB as a curriculum, I guess if you ask most students, they would say it's one of the most kind of stressful and demanding curriculums, high school curriculums. And I don't think, many people have said it, it's not because one subject is quite demanding. It's just because you have 6 subjects, 3 at a higher level and 3 at a standard level, which all have an extremely vast workload. And because of that, it's just each of the subjects compounding onto each other. That's the issue. But I think if I were to give one piece of advice to other students, and it's something I fortunately found out quite early into my whole high school curriculum, is that if you look at the kind of big picture, it's just too overwhelming. And it's happened to me before. It's happened to many other students where they just get overwhelmed with the experience because there's just too much to kind of comprehend or digest at one point of time. It's more about you have to take 1 week at a time, because let's say in 1 week you have a few assignments you have to do. If you kind of break it down into 1 week and then 1 day, and then you just get one task done at a time, eventually you will be able to manage your time effectively to get everything done. And that way, then you're not too overwhelmed. So I think and also another thing is just instead of going into it with like a pessimistic attitude and thinking that it's going to be too hard, you should embrace the challenge, because I've heard from many other students, many other graduates and alumni from my high school, that once you've got through IB, your first maybe 1 or 2 years of university, depending where you are, may seem like a breeze, just because you've gone through that strenuous challenge and the demanding curriculum.
Wow. Yeah. That's great advice, and that's truly something that people can look forward to and take comfort from. Yeah. Andy, how do you advise anyone who's feeling a bit overwhelmed?
Right. So I think for all high school curricula, especially IB, in order to succeed, the key is really, I would say it boils down to sort of 2 things. The first thing is something that Vihan mentioned, which is sort of time management. How do you budget enough time for each course so that you're giving each course the attention that it needs and deserves, right? And as adults now, as professionals, we realize that time management skills are things that we need for the rest of our lives. So there's no better time to develop that than in high school, right? So there are a lot of online tools that you can use now to sort of calendar in your time, to budget your time, and to hold yourself accountable, and I encourage students to use that. The second thing that I think is really important for all high school students, but especially for IB, is the ability to communicate effectively with your teachers. As we all know, IB can be a bit subjective. Most students apply for universities using an IB predicted grade, IBPG. And because it's a predicted grade, there's a high degree of subjectivity. So really having that open communication with each of your teachers, understanding what their expectations are and where you need to be to get there is half the battle.
Great.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the predicted grades, because for me, I mean, from what I've heard, it's a very controversial method of applying, just because some people think it relies more on your personal relationship with your teacher rather than your kind of full academic capabilities. And it's interesting because I found out that during IB, it's somewhat of the teacher's behalf, but they kind of embrace the relationship to be more, not necessarily a friendship, but not a very kind of rigid relationship. It's more fluid, where they're willing to really support you and to get to know you on a personal level. And I think that's very beneficial from a student standpoint, because not only are you able to kind of flourish in the academic environment, they're able to support you with other things, and just even if you're feeling overwhelmed or if you're feeling very stressful with the course, they're able to kind of guide you along the process. So more than just being an academic teacher, they're kind of teaching you about life as well and your journey through life. And I think it is very important to embrace that and know that teachers are there to help you. As kind of obvious as it sounds, students are often have somewhat of a negative mindset towards teachers, which I don't think is necessarily the right way to go about it, because teachers are there to get the best out of you and help you to the best of their ability. So I think for any high school curriculum, and especially IB, it is very important to have a very good relationship with all of your teachers.
I'd say that's critical.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Andy, as we are heading into the summer months, and there's some time stretching beyond many students at the moment, especially high school students, what would you say? What would you advise them to do to make the most of their time? And something that's going to help them with their university application.
Right. So for students who are going to be applying to universities this fall, I think there are a lot of things that they should be doing this summer to maximize their time. I think one really important thing that comes off the top of my mind is starting your application essays early. So don't wait until the start of the school year to start, but rather start in the summer. I think that's really important, especially for the U.S. applications. The second thing is visiting university campuses. So if you have an opportunity to actually fly to the U.S. or the U.K. or some other country, I think it's really important to sort of visit various universities in person to get a sense of what's out there. I think a lot of times we rely on websites, on advice from family and friends, but I think the most important thing is for the student, him or herself, to actually set foot on campus to get a feel of the university, speak with professors, speak with students, speak with admissions officers to get a really good sense of that place.
Fantastic. Alka, do you have anything to add?
No, actually, I think, Andy's kind of summarized it, but definitely it can't just be about the students itself not having some fun. I mean, I remember Vihan telling me, Mom, I can't just be doing all these different courses, It is about me having a break too. And I think that, yes, as parents, we need to kind of step back, because if they're going to step into grade 11 and 12, the pressure is tremendous. So if really they don't get a bit of rest, it's really going to take a toll on them. So sometimes it is about giving them the opportunity to make the choice. And we just being in the, sort of backhand and forefront as well, just giving them the advice, but let them make the choice, be there to give them the direction, I think.
Well said.
Well said indeed. And Vihan, I'm going to give you the final word. As you contemplate a long summer, and I know you're going into national service. So tell us what you've got planned.
So I think it's interesting because I've had experience with research in biomedical engineering, because for me there's kind of two routes that I could go. It's either going down the research path, which would involve getting a master's and a PhD, or it's about getting my engineering degree and then using that and to go into any other profession I want to. And when I had my interview for one of the UK universities I applied to, they had a careers talk, and it was interesting to see all the different companies that students who graduated from, or who kind of graduated based on that degree could get into. And so for me, I've realized that engineering as a degree is very important to solve problems and to critically think. And so that's what I'm hoping to get the most out of that degree. And then I'm looking into maybe moving into consultancy or in banking or finance, or because I feel like that's where my kind of thinking resides, just because I like to work with numbers, I like to work with people, but I like to do all that when I have problems to solve. So for me, when I have problems to solve, that's what kind of makes me tick and allows me to really enjoy my life.
Oh, well said. And the world always needs more engineers. You can never have too many engineers.
That's true.
Yeah. So I really would like to thank the three of you for your insights, exceptional insights. And, we've all learned a lot about enjoying the application process, communicating with the people around you and asking for help. And, and finally, committing to, it is a big commitment. You have to commit to your life. You have to commit to turning up. But it's, very much about enjoying it along the way. So thank you again, and we'll be posting this podcast on wherever you listen to podcasts, SoundCloud, iTunes, etc. Do check us out on celebratingthestory.com, and thank you, all three of you, again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
very
so much.
Thank you.